Let us start with the thing everyone gets wrong. Viking helmets did not have horns. Not one single Viking helmet with horns has ever been found. The one actual Viking helmet we have found, discovered in Norway in 1943, is a simple iron bowl with a nose guard, no horns. The horned helmet idea came from 19th century theatrical costume design and Romantic-era paintings of noble barbarians. It stuck. It was always wrong. And that's the Vikings in miniature. Nearly everything popularly believed about them, the mindless brutality, the dirtiness, the contempt for learning, is either exaggerated or false. The real Vikings were farmers, traders, explorers, poets, and craftspeople. They were also sometimes raiders. But raiding was not their defining activity. It was one tool among many. The real story of the Vikings is extraordinary enough that it does not need the horns. The word Viking originally meant someone who went on a raid or voyage. It was not a term for an entire people. The people we call Vikings came from Scandinavia, modern Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. They were North Germanic people who had lived in those lands for thousands of years. The Viking Age, the period we associate with their exploration and raids, ran roughly from 793 AD to 1066 AD. It started with a raid on the monastery at Lindisfarne on the coast of England. That raid shocked the Christian world and announced the Vikings' arrival on the European stage. But the question worth asking is, why that moment? The answer. Scandinavians had been developing superior shipbuilding technology for decades. The longship, shallow enough to sail up rivers, seaworthy enough to cross oceans, fast enough to beach and launch quickly, was the most versatile vessel in the world at that time. The longship was the key to everything. Without it, the Viking Age does not happen. Most people think of the Vikings as raiders going west, but the Swedish Vikings went east. They followed the river systems of what is now Russia, the Volga, the Dnieper, the Don, deep into Eastern Europe and Central Asia. They founded a trading network that connected Scandinavia to the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic Caliphate. They were called the Varangians. They founded the city of Novgorod around 862 AD. They founded Kiev, the capital of modern Ukraine, shortly after. Swedish Vikings traveled all the way to Baghdad, the largest and wealthiest city in the world at the time. They traded furs, amber, and enslaved people for silver, silk, and spices. Archaeologists have found Arabic coins in Swedish graves, and Swedish runestones that commemorate journeys to Sirkland, the Arabic lands. The Vikings were not barbarians who hated civilization. They were traders who crossed the entire known world to reach it. Around the year 1000 AD, a Norse explorer named Leif Erikson landed on the coast of North America. He called it Vinland. This is not legend. In 1960, archaeologists discovered the remains of a Norse settlement at Lonso Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada. Carbon dating confirmed it was built around 1000 AD. Norse-style buildings, iron nails, a bronze cloak pin. Definitively Norse. Definitively in North America. Columbus arrived in 1492. The Vikings were there 500 years earlier. Why didn't it stick? Why didn't the Norse establish permanent settlements? The indigenous peoples of North America, called Skraelings in the Norse sagas, resisted strongly. The Norse were too few, too far from home, and too isolated to maintain a colony against determined resistance. They eventually gave up and went home. Columbus's 1492 voyage succeeded partly because it was backed by state resources and immediately followed by military colonization. Leif Erikson got there first. But he couldn't stay. The Vikings are often discussed as a distinct people who eventually disappeared. That's the wrong frame. They didn't disappear. They became other people. Norse settlers in England intermarried with Anglo-Saxons. About 6% of the male population of England today carries Norse Y chromosome DNA. English has hundreds of words from Old Norse. Sky, window, knife, egg, husband, anger, trust, ugly, wrong, all Norse. In France, the Norse settlers in Normandy became the Normans. The Normans conquered England in 1066, ironically ending the Viking Age by completing the cultural merger that had been happening for 200 years. In Ireland, the Vikings founded Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, Limerick, and Cork. In Russia, The Varangians became the Rus, giving Russia its name. In Sicily and southern Italy, Norse adventurers called the Normans built a kingdom that blended Arabic, Byzantine, and Norse culture into one of the most sophisticated states in medieval Europe. The Vikings did not invade and leave. They arrived, settled, married, and became the people they lived among. The Viking Age ended. The Viking genes did not. The Vikings had no formal writing system in their early history. They used runes, a simple alphabet for carving on stone and wood. But from the 11th century onward, as they adopted Christianity and the Latin alphabet, they began writing down their oral traditions. The result was the Norse sagas, some of the greatest literature of the medieval world. The Prose Edda and Poetic Edda contain Norse mythology: Odin, Thor, Loki, the World Tree, Yggdrasil, Ragnarok. You know these stories. They are in movies and comics, in video games. Thor's hammer Mjolnir is one of the most recognized symbols on Earth today, but the sagas also contain remarkably detailed historical accounts. The story of Leif Erikson's voyage to North America comes from the Vinland sagas, written down in the 13th century, describing events from 1000 AD. For centuries, historians dismissed these as legend. Then Lance O. Meadows was found, and the sagas were proved right. When oral traditions are specific and detailed, they are often remembering something real. The Viking sagas were history, told the Viking way. The Viking Age is usually dated as ending in 1066. That is the year of two events that bookend an era. In September 1066, the last major Viking invasion of England, led by King Harald Hardrada of Norway, was defeated at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. The English King Harold defeated him decisively. 3 weeks later, Harold was himself defeated by the Normans at the Battle of Hastings. The Normans were the Norse who had settled France 150 years earlier. The end of the Vikings was a Viking defeating a Viking, the older Norse culture losing to its own cultural descendant. But the deeper reason the Viking Age ended was simpler. The conditions that created it faded. Scandinavia converted to Christianity, which reduced the cultural justification for raiding Christian monasteries. Feudalism organized European defenses. Coastal raids became less profitable. The Norse kingdoms became centralized states, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, that channeled aggression into organized warfare, not individual raiding. The Vikings didn't stop being Norse. They became Norwegians, Swedes, and Danes, and those countries still exist. Norse women had legal rights that were extraordinary for their era. They could own property, they could divorce their husbands, and keep their property after divorce. They managed farms and households independently when men were away, which was often. They participated in trade, and some of them fought. The Norse sagas describe women called shield maidens who went into battle. For years, historians assumed these were mythological. Then, in 2017, a Viking burial in Birka, Sweden, which had been known for decades and assumed to be male because it contained weapons, was DNA tested. The warrior was a woman. She was buried with a sword, a spear, shields, a battle knife, arrows, and 2 horses. She had been presumed male because of the weapons. The assumption of maleness was the scientist's error, not the burial's. The Birka warrior is now the most cited example of the danger of assuming gender from grave goods. And it confirms what the sagas said all along. Viking women were not passive. Some of them went to war. The days of the week in English are named after Norse gods. Tuesday, Tyr, the god of war. Wednesday, Woden, Odin. Thursday, Thor. Friday, Frigg, Odin's wife. Every week in the English-speaking world, you say 4 Norse divine names without realizing it. Thor is one of the most commercially successful superheroes in history, a character created in 1962 by Marvel Comics, based on the Norse god. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has made over $2.9 billion from Thor films alone. Norse mythology has generated more 21st century cultural output than the mythology of any other medieval European people. Loki, Odin, Ragnarok, Valhalla, Valkyries. These words are in modern pop culture because they were in the Norse sagas, because the sagas were written down when the Vikings became Christian, because the monks preserved what the poets had remembered. A chain of cultural transmission 1,000 years long, from a fire in a Norse great hall to a monk's manuscript to Jack Kirby's drawing board to a $300 million film. The Vikings conquered North America, founded Kiev, and reached Baghdad. Their myths conquered the imagination.